Welcome to Breaking Ground. I'm your host, Devin Kulka. On this show, we meet with industry leaders in the construction, real estate, and business industries. Today's guest is Kevin Law, president of the Long Island Association. We're going to be talking about cool things such as Kulka building affordable housing for Governor Cuomo in his early days, renewable energy, and COVID. So let's tune into the show. So we're here with Kevin Law, president and CEO of the LIA, Long Island Association. Also, really involved in everything on Long Island. I was telling Rob earlier, I've been looking at your resume, and it is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. I typically try to condense this to one piece of paper, but I really couldn't take anything out, and it's stacked. So I want to kind of understand, growing up, you obviously weren't thinking you're going to get this involved into incredible stuff. What did you want to do?
Well, like most kids growing up on Long Island, I had no idea.
Okay.
I am the fifth of 8 children. Grew up in Smithtown. My entire life, I've been in the town of Smithtown. So we have 4 boys and 4 girls. My parents did not go to college. They grew up in the Depression. And having 8 kids, they had 3 jobs. My dad worked for New York Life Insurance in Manhattan and lived on the Long Island Railroad, and so we didn't see him all that often. And he had a job on the weekends as well at Bristol Myers. And my mom, she worked as well, J.C. Penney's, and then she worked in the Smithtown School Districts as a teacher's aide. So
it's tough when you got a lot of kids, a lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah, a lot of mouths to feed, but you know what? I've always had a job. Since 10 years old, I've had a job. My brother, he signed up for a Newsday paper route, and you had to be 12. So
wow.
I couldn't do it.
Times have changed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, now my paper boy is a 60-year-old man who delivers the paper at 5 o'clock in the morning.
It does a great job at it.
Yes, but we did it in the afternoon. But what was great about it, it led to all of my lawn mowing jobs, my leaf raking jobs, my snow shoveling jobs, and so I've always had money in my pocket.
And always a work ethic, obviously.
But I needed it because, if we wanted a little bit of extra food, or my parents would buy me a cheap pair of jeans, but if I wanted Levi's, I had to pay the extra. And so it was always, a good work ethic, and so I've been working hard, ever since I was 10 years old.
That's great. Yeah. And my father, kind of the same story, where he got his motivation because he came from a very poor family. His parents were tailors, and he couldn't afford to go to the movies. He couldn't afford anything growing up. So he always told himself, I want to be able to do whatever I want to do when I want to do it. And it is a motivation.
Yeah, it is. I wouldn't say we were a poor family. We were definitely a middle-income family where we didn't have a lot of extra money to do anything nice. My parents made enough to pay all the bills and keep all the kids fed. And so I went on to Suffolk Community College after graduating from Smithtown West High School. And at Suffolk, I started realizing that, if you actually go to class and do the homework and study, it's not too hard, because I was never a good student in high school. And it was there I started taking some courses in political science and environmental science, and got a real interest in the Long Island government and real estate, the planning aspects of things. And then after Suffolk, I transferred to Stony Brook University, and there I did a internship with the Brookhaven Community Development Office, whose leader at the time was Ed Romaine, the current Brookhaven Town Supervisor. So Ed and I have been friends for over 30 years.
Great guy.
Yeah, he is. And then after Stony Brook, I went and got my master's in planning from Hunter College in the city.
Nice.
And there I did a graduate internship and with the New York State Assembly. So a sign on the wall. I really didn't know what the New York State Assembly was, the New York State Senate, and they wanted to assign me to some assemblyman in Queens, Forest Hills. I was like, don't you have any of these out in Suffolk County? And he said, oh, is that where you're from? And I was
What's
like,
Smithtown, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so they assigned me to this guy named Pat Halpin. And Pat was a state assemblyman at the time. And We started out as interns. My co-intern was Richie Schaefer,
Wow.
the current Babylon Town supervisor.
Wow, that's
and
great.
The head of the Democratic Party in Suffolk County. And then while working after I did the internship, Patrick hired me as a legislative aide. I was making about 10 grand a year or something like that. It was not a lot of money. But I was able to go to law school while working for the assembly. So I went to St. John's Law, still not knowing what I wanted to do. And then the day I found out I passed the bar exam was the day Patrick won the Suffolk County executives race.
Wow.
And so rather than going to work at a law firm, I went and worked for Patrick in the county, and then headed up all of the county's environmental programs, affordable housing programs, and I eventually became the head of the real estate department at a very young age, and started buying up open space, pine barrens, farmlands, and
How old are you at the time?
I was in my late 20s.
That's impressive for somebody in their 20s to have that position and to get involved in that stuff. You don't see that a lot these days.
Yeah, it was a little nervous at the time, but I eventually figured things out. Had some good mentors along the way.
Did you know what you were doing at the time? Did you
Pretty
really
much,
soak it up?
No, not really. I knew enough to not be dangerous, but I didn't know everything that I needed to know. So that's why I had some mentors. And former Suffolk County Executive John Klein became one, and Jim LaRocca, the former head of the Long Island Association, and some others. They became mentors. In fact, when we were there, Patrick, as the county exec, he was only 34.
Wow.
And so Newsday did an article on us. They called us all the kiddie corps, because we were a bunch of kids, really not knowing what we were doing. But we did a good job. We had no issues, no scandals. But unfortunately, the stock market crashed in '87 as well, and the economy wasn't great. And so we only did one term, and from there, so after 4 years. I went to a big international law firm called Nixon Peabody, and I was an associate in the environmental and energy department. Started representing energy companies, big energy companies, TransCanada, Pennsylvania Power and Light, Duke Energy, on projects on Long Island, and handled the real estate aspects of things, which was pretty cool. I spent 12 years there, became a partner, became the managing partner of the Long Island office. But then my friend of mine from law school, Steve Levy, became county executive and asked me to come back and work for him and run the county, which I did for about 3.5 years. And then Governor Spitzer at the time tapped me to become the next chairman and CEO of the Long Island Power Authority, because he knew me as an energy guy.
Okay.
I wasn't a utility guy, but I was an
You're an energy guy.
And so I had a ball there. And then really led LIPA to its renewable energy platform of solar energy and wind and energy efficiency. But it was a very thankless job to run a utility, because everybody hates the utility.
So how old are you about this time?
When I went to go run LIPA, I was 47.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which it's great to see that the relationships you made in law school and early on, I mean, these are names that are still around doing very successful things, which, I'm a big believer that your network is your net worth. As cliche as it sounds, you grew up with these people and you guys all really supported each other.
Yeah, we did, and I always treated people, the right way. I didn't care whether they were Republican or Democrat, or whether they were the receptionist or the CFO.
Who's going to do the right job?
And you just treat everybody the same way, and you build relationships. I always follow the old motto: make friends, not enemies.
Absolutely.
And you never know, who you're going to meet. Look at what I just told you before. I interned for Ed Romaine as he's the Brookhaven supervisor today. You never know who you're going to meet doing an internship and where they're going to be down the road, and impacting your career later on. So I got to know the governors. So Spitzer put me in charge of LIPA. David Patterson appointed me the chairman of Stony Brook University. And then Andrew Cuomo, who I got to know. Believe it or not, this is a great story. And I don't want to take up too much of it.
No,
This is a great
it's fine.
story.
I love it.
Because this involves your dad, Jack.
Yes. Is this the? I know what you're going to.
So when I worked for Pat Halpin in the county of Suffolk and oversaw the real estate department, the county, if people don't pay their property taxes, the county puts a lien on your property. And eventually, if you don't pay off the lien with some interest and penalties, the county will actually take a tax deed to that property. And what the county does eventually, if it's environmentally sensitive property, they'll preserve it. And if it's something on the commercial side, they'll sell it and auction it off. And then there's a lot of property that they try to give back to towns for affordable housing purposes. So Andrew Cuomo at the time, he was also probably late 20s as well.
Young. Yep.
He created this organization called HELP. It's a homeless housing organization. And they had built a facility in Brooklyn, their first big, and he wanted to do one out in the suburbs. And at the time, we had even back in the 80s, Suffolk County had a big homeless problem. And the way we treated our homeless, we just put them in motels. And most of the homeless in Suffolk County are women with children. The guy splits. Woman didn't have a job or she's raising the kids. They have no place to live. And so the county stuck them in motels. And the kids gave them a lunchbox from Mickey D's. And they'd sit on a bed, and that was it.
It's sad.
And but they would never recover from the reason of why they were the reason why they were homeless. So Andrew Cuomo, he created this organization to provide not only shelter, but daycare, nurse, and job training all in one facility to help the women get back on their feet.
The support system.
Exactly, so they could get back into traditional housing or transitional housing as opposed to shelter. And we did that at the same cost as what the motel owners were charging us.
Wow.
So from a government, as a taxpayer perspective, it made sense. So we had this 27-acre piece of land in Brookhaven, in Bellport, North Bellport, which we were prepared to give to Andrew's organization to build this facility. And we needed somebody to develop it.
Who did Andrew call?
And we called Jack Holka. And so me and a friend of mine who I'm still good friends with today, Larry Belinsky, who worked for the Housing Finance Agency, State House, Andrew and Patrick put us in charge of getting this project done. And so that's when I got to know the current governor. And with your dad's help, we had a very warm winter, I remember it. It was like the winter of 1990. If it was either 89 or 90, and the whole month of January was in the 60s. And your dad got the project done 3 months ahead of schedule and under budget.
That's what we do.
Yeah, exactly, which was great. And of course, the current governor was very pleased because
Absolutely.
Projects get screwed up all the time, and here this didn't. And so I got to know the governor and your dad.
He was a very interesting character back then, too.
Yes, he was. You weren't even born yet.
No, I wasn't.
But it was a great project. Still operates to this day.
That's great. I'd love to know the address of that if you can get
right,
that for me one day.
It's right off Station Road in North Bellport. It's called HELP. And it's operated by the Suffolk County Department of Social Services. Still operates today, saving taxpayers money. And so the current governor, to his credit, came up with a great idea that worked. And your dad did a great job in the construction.
That's amazing. My dad tells me these kinds of stories all the times, but doesn't have all of the facts. He always told me, I know Andrew from his days of building, affordable housing, and that's kind of where it stops. I'm so glad I get to sit down with you and learn a little bit more of how that came together, because it's interesting stuff and it's awesome stuff.
Yeah, no, it really was. So that was cool. So then, so Spitzer appointed me Chairman Leipa, Patterson, the head of Stony Brook, and then Governor Cuomo has appointed me to several things. I've been very privileged. He appointed me as a co-chair of the Regional Economic Development Council, which we could talk about. He's appointed me the chair of the New York State Casino Location Board, which I did. He reappointed me the chair of Stony Brook. And most recently, appointed me to the board of the MTA, another very important agency for the state, but another thankless job. And none of these jobs. I do all these jobs pro bono. Don't get any salary for any of these jobs. These are jobs I do, because I have a public service gene in my body. But my day job is I run the Long Island Association, the LIA. We've been around for 95 years. We sort of act as Long Island's Chamber of Commerce, and we advocate for businesses in Albany, in Mineola, and Hauppauge, our two county seats.
And LIA is super, super strong. I mean, my father grew up, obviously, he founded the HIA. So I grew up in the world of the HIA, and I know LIA is probably the best on Long Island, and HIA is right there,
HIA
right
is
there
great
next
too.
to them.
Terry Alessi Maselli, she does a great job. We're more of a regional chamber, and that group pretty much founded on behalf of the Hauppauge Industrial Park here, and that's their main role. They branch out into other things as well, but we work collaboratively with them, and you know what? There are so many people and elected officials that are anti-business today. We need people speaking on behalf of the business community because we're the ones who generate all the revenues, the income for our residents, the tax revenues to allow government to function. But there's this movement, that business is bad, stop any type of growth, and it's something that we need groups like the LIA and the HIA to
and the collaboration between the two groups like that, it's powerful stuff, and we need that from other groups as well.
Yeah, you're right. So you're so right, Devin.
So let's you mentioned some of the roles you've been in with Governor Cuomo. Let's go to a big topic of discussion, and that's COVID. And you were put on the team to help open up Long Island, and I know to this day you speak. You have meetings on that daily. It's still very much here. It's still very much a reality. Things have slowed down a lot since the apex. However, there's a good chance that this is coming back to an extent. And I know the first time around, we certainly weren't ready for anything like that. Are we ready for, a second wave right now? Or because this could be completely destructive for all businesses if we have to shut down again.
Yes, you know what? I think the only thing that's certain is that this virus is uncertain, and nobody really knows yet. The governor used a great line that essentially we're learning how to fly the plane as we're building the plane because a lot of this is new. I think we will be better prepared in the fall than we were in the spring because now we've gotten through this. Here on Long Island, most people get it. And they realize that this is a very serious issue. I know, personally, my wife's mother, the grandmother of my children, died in April from it. They had to say goodbye to their grandma on FaceTime.
It's awful.
My best friend from law school, just last Friday, got released after 189 days in the hospital. He's a walking miracle. Not walking yet, but soon to be, but a miracle he's been released. So this is real, and I think most Long Islanders know somebody, a neighbor, a friend, a worker, or somebody who's been impacted by this, or they've been impacted economically because we had the state had to shut down to get control of the virus, so our hospitals were not overwhelmed. As you mentioned, the governor appointed me. He created these control rooms, 10 of them throughout the state, the 10 different regions of the state. So the Long Island control room is made up of County Executive Steve Ballone and Laura Curran, the head of the Long Island Fed, John Durso, former Huntington Councilwoman Tracy Edwards, who now heads up the Long Island NAACP. And
Love her, by the way. She's also been in the Colca Interactive world and a contributor.
She's great. I love her. And myself, and we meet every day at 3:30 in the afternoon virtually, and we have been meeting every day since May, when we didn't meet in April because April everyone was still shut down. But as we began to try to reopen, if you remember, everybody forgets. We had phase 1, then phase 2, and phase 3, and phase 4, and each phase a number of businesses were allowed to open. And part of the struggle is that Well, I won't say the struggle, but the reality is over 98% of all businesses are open in some type of capacity now. They may have some limitations on how many people could be in their place of business or their restaurant. Um, and, schools have reopened, but there are still some businesses out there that are not allowed to open. Movie theaters, performing art theaters, comedy clubs, indoor and outdoor amusement parks. So like the Adventurelands, the Splish Splash, staples of Long Island, the Paramount Theater, and other theaters. So they're still struggling. And catering halls, all the big catering halls, they've laid off thousands of Long Islanders. They're still not working. So think about all the weddings and bar mitzvahs and proms and graduation, whatever.
And then all of the vendors that go along with those parties.
The DJs, the flowers, the limos, all hurting. And so we can't forget them. And so we've been trying to continue to open the valve to allow more of those businesses to open. But right now I think there's a hesitancy because of what's happening in the rest of the country where we're seeing spikes. And also I think the state wanted to see how things went once schools open. And I think if we don't see a big spike when it comes to schools,
Let's let them open up.
let's the valve open up some more. So the colleges were not off to a great start. Especially throughout the country. Long Island colleges are doing a good job, but so there's a concern there. In fact, 40% of all new COVID cases today are people under 30 years old. And
Disregard for the social distancing, drinking together.
yeah, they just they don't have the discipline, or they don't think they're going to be impacted, or they think if they get it, it's not going to impact them. And they may be true. All of that is true. But the thing is that they get it, even if they're asymptomatic, and they can bring it home to mom or dad or to grandma, and then they get it. So that's where the issue and the concerns are. So we're not out of the woods yet. I think Long Islanders need to keep their guards, up and their masks on. And until there's a vaccine that works, this is going to be our new normal.
I keep watching the city, and I know you're really on Long Island, but you have restaurants that winter's coming. Nobody's gonna want to sit outside and eat. We have to be cognate. We have to help the restaurants in the city as well. I know a lot of city restaurant owners are really getting destroyed right now, and I think I saw a statistic that 60 to 70% of them are going to be out of business by the end of the year if we don't allow indoor dining.
Well, it's not just restaurants. That you're right, but the New York City economy is still very important to Long Island. Our economies are linked. Brooklyn and Queens are on Long Island, but most people who work in the city from Nassau or Suffolk go into Manhattan. And 30% of Nassau County residents still commute into the city, but they bring back over 50% of their income to Nassau County. And that New York City income supports real estate values in Nassau County, and then those people are spending money in the downtowns in Nassau counties. And so we need New York City to stay strong.
Absolutely.
And Suffolk, about 10% of Suffolk residents still commute into Manhattan, but they bring back over 20% of the disposable income to our region. So the New York City economy is still very important to the Long Island economy, and we should all be concerned of what's happening in the city, because we can't allow the city to continue to spiral downward. We need the city to get better and stronger.
And it is bad right now. I walked through the city probably 3-4 weeks ago, and it was really empty. And I went down in the subways, and there's not a lot of people there. It's the greatest city in the world.
Right.
One of the amazing things about living on Long Island is the close proximity to the city, and it's one of the biggest economic drivers in the world. So obviously, Long Island is going to have it hugely affected by the economy in New York City. But you talked about all the people that are commuting to the city, and kind of leads me into the next topic of the MTA. I know the MTA is getting hammered right now because people are canceling their monthly subscriptions. People aren't riding the trains. Obviously, we have to follow social distancing, and it's difficult in a confined space. But MTA, I believe, got $3 billion during the height of it, and now is really looking to the federal government for another 2.9 that's really needed to help the MTA survive. Um, how does the MTA rebound from this?
It's a real concern. It's probably the biggest concern in our region. As I mentioned before, I'm the Suffolk County representative on the MTA board. Steve Malone nominated me. The governor appointed me, and so the board meetings are very scary because we've been doing them all virtually since March as well. We're a $16 billion annual operating budget. We have an $11 billion problem. Just do the math. During the height of the pandemic, the Long Island Railroad ridership was down 95%. The Metro North rails were down 95%, and the subways and buses were down 90%. So you have no fares coming in. Then the MTA gets its money from three sources primarily. So fares, bridges and tunnels. They collect more in tolls than they need to operate the bridges and tunnels, and so the excess subsidizes the mass transit. No, everybody had to stay home. Nobody was going over the bridges and tunnels, and so the bridges and tunnels weren't generating fares to subsidize the MTA. And then we get a real estate transfer tax from Manhattan real estate deals. Real estate market in Manhattan is very interesting right now. Those revenues were not forthcoming either. So our three primary sources of revenues just dried up. The costs stayed the same because we needed to operate the trains, buses, and subways to allow cops and hospital workers to get to and from their jobs, and firemen. And so you needed to, so your expenses continue, your revenues decrease. It's a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely.
And so if we don't get, fares are already high enough. We can't increase fares. But if we don't get help from the federal government, it's going to be very draconian type of measures, to keep the MTA alive. And why should Long Islanders care? Again, for the reasons I just stated before. The New York City economy is very important to Long Island. Our roads are already jam-packed. They don't have the capacity to handle more cars on the road. If we need a viable, strong, reliable, safe Long Island Railroad to move people to and from, and there are a lot of Long Island businesses, including here in the Hop Hog Industrial Park, who rely on a New York City labor pool now. So we need those opportunities for reverse commutation. That's why investments are being made in the railroad. We need that to continue. And so the Long Island economy will suffer tremendously if we don't help get the MTA back on its feet. And the only one who can really help us is the federal government. And why should the federal government help the MTA? Well, the metropolitan transportation region, which includes City, Long Island, and Westchester, and then Putnam, and Orange County, and parts of New Jersey, and even up to Greenwich, Connecticut, that region sends billions of dollars to the federal government in taxes because of the economic engine that it is. And if you kill the mass transit system that allows that economic engine to work, the federal government is going to lose all that revenue as well. So it's in the federal government's interest to help save the MTA.
We should make this a topic of discussion on the next debate, and maybe they can talk civilly on it. An idea I heard prior to COVID that is completely outside the box. Don't know if it's even plausible, but potentially a revenue stream is it possible to sell naming rights to the bridges, the tunnels, etc.? Just like they sell a sponsorship for, the stadiums and MetLife Stadium and M&T Bank Stadium. Can you sell naming rights to a bridge and say, this is the Coca-Cola Bridge? Would people pay big money for that, or is that just too outside the box and not even possible?
I don't know legally what's possible and impossible. I don't think it's a crazy idea. We tend to name bridges after politicians, and we tend to name a lot of things after ex and former politicians. So that's an interesting idea. I don't know. Usually there is some law governing how parks can be named or anything owned by the taxpayers. So we should have somebody to take a look at.
Food for thought.
Yes.
So want to talk a little bit about energy and wind farms going up. You were involved in the largest solar project that the state has ever seen. Renewable energy is such a topic of discussion these days. Last year we had the moratorium on the gas because of the pipeline that was stopped coming down. As a builder, I know how important it is for National Grid to continue service for now with that pipeline and gas usage. But the goal is to get to a point where renewable energy is the main source of energy, but it's going to take some time. In regards to the moratorium that had happened and the negotiating that was done between National Grid and the municipalities, how do we get to a point where renewable energy is sufficient enough to take on large projects that are going on, like Belmont, like Ronkonkoma Hub, like the Nassau Hub? How do we continue to push renewable energy and make that the main source of energy?
Well, I think it's a good question. I think setting the table for it, we've talked about a lot of negative things that are impacting Long Island economy, especially COVID, in addition to the businesses that still aren't allowed to operate. A lot of our small businesses in our downtowns have been significantly impacted too. And so our economy needs help. We talked about the mass transit system. That needs help. In terms of some of the positive and the opportunities to help address some of the challenges that we're facing longer term is certainly in the area of energy. And everybody supports a clean environment. Nobody wants to breathe dirty air, swim in dirty waters. So, and Long Island's environment has always been our economy. So there's tremendous support for renewable energy, both solar and wind, as well as becoming smarter and more efficient and using less energy. Those are all good things that that I tried to do when I was running LIPA, and I think we were successful at it. But we have a long ways to go. And when it comes to solar, Long Island's like the leader in the entire state of New York. We have more use of solar on Long Island than anywhere else in New York. When it comes to wind, we don't have really the land that would be capable of doing what's called terrestrial wind projects like you see out in the Midwest and upstate. But we have the most amazing opportunities for offshore wind. The only place that offshore wind is going to make sense in New York is off the coast of Long Island. You're not going to do it in the Hudson River, and they don't want it up in the Great Lakes. But offshore wind makes sense on Long Island. One, for three reasons. One, we have great wind. Two, the bay bottom, the ocean bottom off the coast of Long Island is not that deep, whereas, say, California, it's like 200 feet deeper until you hit the bottom. Makes construction more challenging. And then two, we have the population demand. If you go from Brooklyn to Montauk on the geographic Long Island, that's 8 million people.
Wow.
That's the demand. And then you add in the other boroughs. So the demand for energy is here. So you want to have the energy resource where the demand is. So Long Island makes sense for all those reasons. That's why all these international energy companies are bidding to do offshore wind off the coast of Long Island. And the windmills are getting bigger. They're becoming more efficient. They're becoming less expensive. And this is an opportunity to also create a lot of clean energy jobs. And that's why we're supporting these offshore wind training institutes at Suffolk Community College, at Farmingdale State College, at Stony Brook University. We need to train the future workforce so they can participate in these jobs because this is the direction the whole world is going in. But we're not there yet, and we need a bridge to get us there. And that's why we need to support clean natural gas in our region so projects like where we're sitting here in the Hauppauge Industrial Park have an adequate, safe, reliable supply of natural gas. And so I think we could do both. It's unfortunate that that project got stymied last year. Hopefully, it could be resurrected because a lot of the wind projects are 5, 6, 10 years out, and nobody wants to turn on their furnace in the winter on Long Island if there's not going to be a good gas supply to stay warm in. So I think we could do both. We need to do both, but certainly the opportunity for Long Islanders is bright when it comes to renewable energy.
And I remember when that was all happening, we were looking at going from like gas mechanical units on some of our buildings to um, dual units that can run off of gas or oil. And the units were less efficient. So they were doing this thing with the pipeline, and the natural gas was stopped. There was a moratorium, and now we were moving backwards on the equipment that we had to use so that we can have a dual purpose unit that runs off of gas and oil. And I felt like we were just completely moving backwards. But I totally agree that renewable energy, it needs to be done. The wind farms are very important. Solar farms are very important. And the quicker the better. But the reality is it's going to take 10 years. It's going to take 15 years. It's going to take a long time. And we need to make sure that we can continue to spur the economy and build until we get there.
Right.
There's a lot going on Long Island right now. Multifamily is definitely happening because we need it. There's a huge demand for affordable housing. We see a lot of transit-oriented developments happening right now. But for a while, local government was not supporting this. The people in the communities were not supporting this. And we're now seeing a shift where people are coming out and saying, I've seen what was done in Patchogue. I've seen what was done in Wyandanch. I want this now in my backyard. I want it to help, where I live in my community, and it's slowly shifting. We still see naysayers coming out, but it's a beautiful thing to see some of these projects now coming to fruition. It's nice, and I know you've always been a supporter of affordable housing and just having a place where our kids, our parents, our community can live without living in an expensive home with high taxes.
Yeah, you're so right. I've had the privilege. I've been the chairman of the Long Island Housing Partnership for the last 13, 15 years as well. And we're the largest developer of affordable housing. We had a board meeting yesterday, and despite the COVID, we're having one of our busiest years ever, and we're involved in projects all over Nassau and Suffolk County, helping developers create affordable housing. And we're seeing more and more. There's still a opposition in many communities, but more and more communities are now supporting it. They realize it's good for their community. It's good for their downtowns. Homeowners who don't need a big home anymore, they don't all want to move to Florida or North Carolina. They want to stay maybe near the grandkids, but they don't want a house. They don't mind the renting, and they want to be near a downtown. That helps increase the availability of homes for people who want to buy. One thing that we have on Long Island, again, it's a challenge, is that we have a high demand and a limited supply, and that's why the rentals that are going up are more expensive because of the laws of supply and demand. Unlike New Jersey and Connecticut, we're part of the tri-state region. A good mix of rental versus ownership is about 35% should be rental, and that's what New Jersey and Connecticut have, and we're down in the teens.
Wow.
And so we don't have the diversity in our housing supply that other regions have. And so it's important that we increase the mix of rental units. It doesn't belong in every part of Long Island. You're not going to put it in the middle of the Pine Barrens or in coastal areas. But where the infrastructure is, like where you have sewers or where sewers can be built and where you have the road networks or the energy systems already in place, that's where we should focus on the multifamily. And most all new multifamily housing projects, they are net generators of revenue to the town and the school district. They produce very limited kids in terms of school age population, and that's always been the fear. So I think people are wising up, and that's why you're seeing more of our elected officials being receptive to the creation of affordable housing. And it's something that we need to do in order to strengthen Long Island, keep our young generation here, because they're going to be our future homeowners and our future taxpayers. So it's all part of the cycle.
You hit the main points. I mean, infrastructure, super important for development, and having the sewer treatment plants that are being built and that are currently active is huge for economic development. The taxes that are coming into these municipalities, even when they're getting IDA incentives, there's a huge tax benefit, and the burden on the school systems by the limited amount of students that are entering the school is not as bad as people thought it was. It's actually almost non-existent. And then, it kind of, traffic is the other one that people are always talking about, which goes back to the point where the MTA and the survival of the MTA and the flourishing of the MTA is so important for the economy.
Yep. Yes, I agree. I agree. I know we got to wrap up. What else? You got anything else for me?
I do. I got 2 questions for you. First question for you to finish it off is, you did a lot of school. You were in school for a long time. What is a course that should be taught in school that currently isn't?
Where, in high school?
High school, college, something that you're like, they should have a course on this. This is used in real life every day.
That's a great question. One, given the climate that we're in, I think a course on, understanding the diversity in our region is important. From we tend to live in a very segregated area, not just through race, but through religions and income. And I think people need to understand the makeup of Long Island in terms, a good course on Long Island, I think, would be good in terms of our economy, our politics, our communities, and our people. I think kids should come out of high school knowing more about our region. That we have the largest Hispanic population in the New York State outside of the Bronx.
I'm Puerto Rican and Cuban, by the way.
Is that right?
I am.
So people don't realize that. We have a growing Asian population, on Long Island. In terms of, in the past, it used to be everybody was Catholic or Jewish. We have a big mix of Protestants, evangelicals, Catholics, Jews, Muslims, and so that wasn't the case, when Long Island's being developed. So I think a good course on Long Island, all aspects of Long Island, our communities, our economy, our politics, our government, kids should come out of there knowing that. And then I think they should also be taught a little bit more. Everyone should be required to take some type of business course, understanding business, because they're going to be in a business whether they're running their home or working for a business someday. And so trying to give them a little bit more of a business acumen when they come out would be good. And then the biggest thing, people need to know how to communicate. The old fundamentals of reading and writing. If you can't communicate, and we live in a communication era now, you're not going to succeed. So really a focus on reading and writing to allow our kids to communicate is important.
Reading, writing, and picking up the phone and calling somebody. Enough of just sending out the email or sending out the text. Last question before we go. If you had your own podcast, who would be your first guest and what would be the topic of that show?
Oh, that's funny. So I always thought, I was asked a question once, if you were able to have dinner, with 3 people, who would you want to have dinner with if you could pick it? And I thought I would love to have a dinner with Jesus Christ, with Abraham Lincoln, and with Jerry Garcia.
I'd love to be at that dinner too.
And I think that would be a pretty fun mix of people. In terms of current, who would I like to interview today? That's a good question. I get to interview a lot of cool people at the LIA, former presidents and athletes. I've had a lot of fun. I've interviewed Derek Jeter,
That's
Peyton and Eli Manning,
wow.
uh, George Jeb Bush. So I'm spoiled. I've already interviewed a lot of really cool people. So I guess the next person I'd have to interview is Devin Colker.
I love it. I love it. Kevin, I really appreciate you coming on today. You are a supporter of Long Island. You are a supporter of the state. You work your butt off all day, every day for the people, and you're incredible. So thank you.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Best of luck to you, and give my best to your dad.
Thank you.
Okay.